So today, President Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte met at the White House to discuss a wide range of issues, including defense spending, the war in Ukraine, and the future direction of NATO. Both leaders generally presented a united front during their talks, especially about their shared desire to end the war in Ukraine. Rutte praised Trump for pressuring European NATO countries to increase their defense budgets, saying that since Trump first took office in 2017, NATO allies in Europe have added hundreds of billions more to their defense spending. I would argue that Russia invading Ukraine was a bigger driver of an increase in defense spending across the European continent, but nonetheless, the metric is technically true. Trump was quick to point out that NATO is now much stronger because of his efforts. But despite these public agreements, there were clear differences between them. One of the biggest moments that showed up was when Trump brought up his old idea of annexing Greenland from Denmark. He said he thought it would happen and even joked about sending more US troops there. Rutte laughed it off and made it clear he didn't want to drag NATO into that conversation. The topic did cause concern in Denmark and Greenland, who quickly issued statements. Danish officials warned that such talks could seriously damage relations between NATO allies, and leaders in Greenland firmly rejected the idea, saying they were not for sale and wanted to build their own independent future. Trump also repeated his criticism of NATO members who, in his view, are not spending enough on their own defense. He said it wasn't fair for the US to pay so much when European countries, which are geographically closer to Russia, don't pay their share. Trump said if countries don't pay up, the US shouldn't be expected to defend them. Now, this idea challenges NATO's Article 5, which says that an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all of them, and it's a core part of the alliance since it was created in 1949. Incidentally, there is actually no requirement to meet a specific threshold of percentage of GDP with regard to NATO. The agreement of 2% defense spending as a goal for every NATO member came from a 2014 agreement made at the NATO summit in Wales, but it wasn't contingent on maintaining membership in NATO, nor does it remove the benefit of protection from a NATO country that isn't meeting that goal. And in fact, there's this misconception that these countries are supposed to be paying into some sort of NATO slush fund, and that's not the case. This just means that a country should be spending 2% of their GDP on their own defense. But Trump is now wanting every country to raise that to 5%, although he hasn't said specifically that's what the United States needs to do as well. So the funny thing about this whole 5% versus 2% and are we paying our fair share argument is the United States would be spending this amount on their own defense anyway. Saying that we are paying more is disingenuous somewhat because there is no payment system here. It's just that for our own interests, the United States spends between 3 and 4% of our GDP on defense. It's not that we pay into anything, and there is no fund, as I said before. Now, on Ukraine, both Trump and Rutte said they wanted to see the war end soon. Trump mentioned that his envoy, Steve Witkoff, was in Moscow trying to work on a ceasefire deal that Ukrainian leaders have already approved. He said he would like to meet with President Putin to help bring the war to a close, but didn't give many details. Rutte emphasized that any peace must be lasting and not a repeat of past failures like the 25 or so different ceasefires that Russia violated since 2014, including the Minsk agreements, which didn't hold. Now, nonetheless, there were smiles and handshakes, even though there was a bit of an undertone of slight tension. Other U.S. officials are going to meet with the Secretary General as well, and Democrats have expressed serious concerns about whether the U.S. is still committed to standing by its allies. Now, Trump's push to make NATO allies pay more, his controversial ideas about Greenland, and questions about his position on Ukraine all raise doubts about the future of America's role in NATO, but I personally believe the alliance will endure. And even so, the President of the United States cannot unilaterally withdraw the country from NATO without involving Congress. In the end, NATO has proven to be one of the most successful alliances in history, keeping peace and stability among its members for over 75 years. While there are disagreements on how to share the costs and responsibilities, the strength of NATO comes from its unity and shared commitment to defend one another. Staying strong together is the best way to protect freedom, security, and democracy for future generations in all of the member countries of NATO, as well as all over the world.